July 3rd, 1863. 15,000 men line up at the edge of a Pennsylvania field. In front of them, 1 mile of open ground and a ridge bristling with cannon. Their commander has just bet an entire nation on a single charge across that field. Most of them will never reach the other side, and the decision to send them, one of the greatest generals in American history called, in his own words, all his fault. We're taught Gettysburg as the turning point. 3 days, the high water mark, the war turns, the end. But that flattens what actually happened. For 2 of those 3 days, the South was winning. The Confederacy was closer to victory than your history class ever admitted. And the battle didn't turn because of destiny. It turned because of one fatal decision. So what really happened on those 3 days in Pennsylvania? And was Lee's great blunder a blunder at all? Stick around. By the summer of 1863, Robert E. Lee was riding high. He had just crushed a much larger Union army at Chancellorsville, so he gambled big. Instead of waiting to be attacked, he marched his army north, out of Virginia, across the Potomac, and straight into Pennsylvania. This was an invasion of the North. Lee threatened Baltimore, Philadelphia, even the rear of Washington itself, and the stakes were almost impossible to overstate. According to the record, if the Union Army was overwhelmed here, the great cities of the North would lie at Lee's mercy, and the Confederacy would, in all probability, finally be recognized by the powers of Europe. A single victory on Northern soil might end the war and split America in two forever. And the Union's response? 3 days before the biggest battle of the war, they changed commanders. On June 28, 1863, General Hooker was suddenly replaced by General George Meade, a solid officer who had never led an entire army in his life. He took command of 90,000 men and a bleeding nation with almost no time to prepare. Neither side actually planned to fight at Gettysburg. It was a small Pennsylvania town where 10 roads happened to meet. The armies stumbled into each other, and the most crucial battle of the war began almost by accident. Meade put his army, around 90,000 men, on a long crest of hills called Cemetery Ridge. Lee's army, around 70,000, lined up on the hills opposite, on Seminary Ridge. On the Union right, a height called Culp's Hill. On the far left, 2 more hills, Round Top and Little Round Top. Remember those. And here is what the legend skips. For the first 2 days, July 1st and 2nd, the Confederates had the advantage. They drove the Union forces back through the town. They captured Culp's Hill. They pushed the Union right out of its strong position. If you had been standing there at the end of day 2, you would have bet on Lee, but the line held by a thread. On the far left, the Union somehow took and kept Little Round Top, the hill that anchored their entire position. Lose that hill, and the whole army could be rolled up. They did not lose it, and that single stubborn hill may have saved the United States. At dawn on the 3rd day, the Federals threw themselves at Culp's Hill and, after what the record calls most desperate fighting, took it back. The 2 days of Confederate momentum had stalled, and this is the moment everything hinged on. Lee had a choice. He could pull back, pick better ground, and make the Union come to him. Or he could gamble everything on one massive blow to the center of the Union line. He chose to attack. The source puts it bluntly. Lee then made the mistake of deciding to stake everything on a mighty effort to break the Union center. And here is where historians have argued for over a century. Lee's most trusted general, Longstreet, is widely said to have begged him not to do it, to warn that no 15,000 men could cross that open ground and take that ridge. Whether those exact words were spoken, we cannot fully verify. But what is certain is that Lee overruled every doubt. He had watched his men do the impossible before. He believed they could do it again. So he gave the order. 15,000 veterans, the flower of the Confederate Army, were lined up at the edge of the trees and pointed at a stone wall 1 mile away. First came the guns. 130 Confederate cannon opened up on the Union center. The largest bombardment of the war. 2 hours of thunder meant to shatter the defenders before the charge. Then the guns fell silent, and the men stepped out of the trees. A column of men, by one account 3 miles long, headed by Pickett's Virginians, began to walk across the open field. For about 1 mile, every single step of the way, they were inside the range of the Federal guns. What happened next is one of the most terrible things in American history. The Union cannon switched to canister, turning the guns into giant shotguns. The record says it plainly. No men ever fought more bravely, but success was impossible. The dead and the dying strewed the ground along the way. The line was mowed down with terrible slaughter. A handful, just a few hundred, actually reached the Union line. For one moment, they touched the ridge. Historians call that spot the high water mark of the Confederacy, the farthest the rebellion would ever get. And then it broke. The effort failed, and the battle was lost. As the survivors staggered back, Lee rode out to meet them. And he did something rare for a man of his stature. He did not blame Longstreet. He did not blame Pickett. He took the entire defeat onto himself. The record notes he magnanimously took the whole blame upon himself, though he might easily have thrown part of it onto his subordinates. The cost is almost unimaginable. Over 20,000 Confederate casualties, more than 23,000 on the Union side. More than 50,000 men killed, wounded, or missing in 3 days on a single field in Pennsylvania. And here is the part that sealed it. On almost the very same day, far to the west, the city of Vicksburg surrendered to General Grant. 2 catastrophic blows to the south in the same 48 hours. Lee retreated back into Virginia, and never again would he be strong enough to invade the North. The Confederacy would fight on for 2 more years. But after Gettysburg, the record is clear. The best it could now hope for was to prolong a war it could no longer win. So was it really Lee's fatal mistake? That is the debate that never ends. Maybe the charge was doomed the moment it was ordered, or maybe in a war Lee had won by daring the impossible simply ran out. What is not in doubt is the result. 3 days, 1 ridge, and 1 decision bent the entire course of American history. 4 months later, Abraham Lincoln stood on that same field. In barely 2 minutes, he gave the dead a meaning that outlived the war. He promised that a government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. That promise was paid for in full right there. So here is my question for you. Was Pickett's charge a tragic blunder or a gamble that any bold general might have made? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more of the history they rush past in school, subscribe. The next story might surprise you even more.